Apotheosis Chapter 34. Luo Zheng stood with the other disciples who had passed the trial. He watched as one trial disciple after another came out of the bloody mountain and threw the crystal shards into the basket. He stood there for a while. Suddenly, he saw Mo Clan appear. He jumped down from the flying chariot and excitedly greeted Luo Zheng. He quickly walked over and took out a handful of crystal shards, throwing them into the basket. Mo Clan had actually passed the trial. This was completely beyond Luo Zheng's expectations. With Mo Clan's bone refining stage strength, he had actually collected 10 purple crystal shards. At that time, Luo Zheng had a lot of crystal shards. He had thought that if he met Mo Clan, he could share some with him. But he hadn't met Mo Clan on the 3rd floor, so he didn't have this opportunity. But now, Mo Clan had actually passed the trial of Bloody Mountain with his own efforts. Luo Zheng was puzzled. With Mo Clan's bone refining stage strength, it would have been very difficult for him to kill phantom beasts on the 3rd floor. Could it be that Mo Clan had hidden his strength? Luo Zheng's mind jumped to this idea. Mo Clan walked over with a proud smile. Haha, brother Luo Zheng, I also passed. How did you collect so many crystal shards? Luo Zheng asked curiously. It's a long story. In short, I was lucky. Then Mo Clan recounted what had happened after he entered the 3rd floor. It turned out that by a freak combination of factors, he actually saw 2 landowning households fighting over a crystal shard. In the end, both of them were seriously injured and were forced out. So he picked up a big bargain and picked up more than 10 purple crystal shards. Just like that, he passed the trial of Bloody Mountain. After listening to Mo Clan's story, Luo Zheng couldn't help but sigh. This guy's luck was really too good. Flying chariots flew back and forth from the Bloody Mountain, picking up all the disciples. Today's trial of Bloody Mountain was finally over. The disciples who passed the trial were all in high spirits, while the disciples who were eliminated were dejected. The children of landowning households that had been eliminated all had gloomy faces as they were quickly taken away by their family members. Before Zhuge Hong left, he fiercely sized up Luo Zheng. He had always been conceited. Although this was his first time participating in the trial of blood and fire, he had always believed that he could pass with 100% certainty. After all, within the 7 major landowning families, there were very few disciples who were unable to even pass the trial by blood and fire. But this time, he was defeated by Luo Zheng. Naturally, he was not convinced. Although Luo Zheng was chatting cheerfully with Mo Clan over there, Luo Zheng obviously felt Zhuge Hong's sinister gaze before he left. However, Luo Zheng didn't care at all. The path of a martial artist was never smooth. Instead, it was filled with obstacles. As long as an obstacle dared to obstruct him, he could only choose to kick it away. There was no other way. Since he had chosen this path, he was not afraid of offending others. At this time, the most depressed and angry people were Luo Peiran and Wang Hengji. Wang Hengji had originally sent 2 of his clansmen to participate in the trial of Bloody Mountain to kill Luo Zheng. However, Luo Zheng's performance had already greatly exceeded Wang Hengji's expectations. Wang Lan and Wang Qing had also not passed the trial by blood and fire. After the 2 of them had gone up the mountain, they had joined Zhuge Hong's ranks of robbers. When they had seen Luo Zheng, they hadn't even had the time to use their clan's killing weapon before they had been eliminated by the other trial disciples. This loss of face was a bit too big. Even Wang Hengji, who had always been calm and collected, left with his group after cursing at Wang Lan and Wang Qing. It seemed that they would have to take their time and think about how to deal with Luo Zheng. As for Luo Peiran, he didn't have anything to say. At this time, if he went up to speak sarcastic words, he would only be asking for his own humiliation. He could only follow behind Wang Hengji with an ashen face. How could he have imagined that the ant-like Luo Zheng had already grown to such a frightening extent? That night, the disciples who had passed the trial by blood and fire officially became outer sect disciples of the Blue Cloud sect. Because it was already late, the instructors of the 33 peaks would have to wait until tomorrow to choose their disciples. All the outer sect disciples would have to stay at the foot of the Bloody Mountain for the night. Tonight, the atmosphere in the dormitory was much better. After all, everyone had finally achieved their first goal through hard work. Many people were so happy that they didn't sleep the whole night. At the same time, they were discussing which peak they should choose. The peak that these trial disciples discussed the most was Instructor Su's Lone Sky Peak. There were many legends about the number 1 Lone Sky Peak among the 33 peaks. It was said that most of the outstanding disciples of the Blue Cloud sect were gathered at Lone Sky Peak. Luo Zheng and Mo Can sat in a corner and listened to their discussion. Seeing Mo Can's eyes sparkling as he listened, Luo Zheng asked, Mo Can, you want to choose Lone Sky Peak? Mo Can scratched his head and laughed, I do want to, but with my strength, I'm afraid Lone Sky Peak won't want me. Mo Can also knew his own limitations. Those who could enter Lone Sky Peak all had outstanding performances. For example, that iron tower-like brawny man with a huge sword in his hand during the day. It seemed like he would definitely enter Lone Sky Peak. Brother Luo Zheng, which peak do you want to go to? I'll go with you. I realized that following by your side, my luck will be very good. Mo Can said. This was the reasoning that Mo Can concluded. What he said was somewhat correct. If it wasn't for Luo Zheng, he probably wouldn't have even passed the C test. And today, in the trial of blood and fire, it was completely because Luo Zheng had saved him. Otherwise, he would have been eliminated long ago. What if I choose Xiao Yufeng? Luo Zheng suddenly laughed. Mo Can was momentarily stunned. Brother Luo Zheng, you aren't joking, right? With Luo Zheng's outstanding performance, he could choose any of the 33 peaks. But Luo Zheng actually said he would choose Xiao Yufeng. Mo Can couldn't help but remind him, Brother Luo Zheng, Xiao Yufeng is ranked last out of all the peaks. Luo Zheng nodded. Then, Instructor Su's face appeared in his mind. If it wasn't for her today, his trial qualification would have been snatched away by Zhong Ming. But Xiao Yufeng was ranked last out of all the peaks. No matter if it was pills, cultivation methods, or the distribution of various monthly allowances, it was far behind the other peaks. Therefore, Luo Zheng was momentarily at a loss. After waiting for the night to quiet down, Luo Zheng finally put this matter aside. Right now, he had more important things to do. He had to find the throwing knife, even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground of Blood Mountain. After Mo Can fell asleep, Luo Zheng cautiously came out of the dormitory. Under the cover of the night, he arrived at the foot of Blood Mountain. After identifying the path in front of him, he went up the mountain. The illusory formation of Blood Mountain wasn't triggered. Naturally, there weren't many kinds of illusory beasts on the mountain. In fact, even snakes, insects, and ants were very rare. There was too much red fantasy sand here, which wasn't suitable for animals to live and grow. Without the illusory formation, Blood Mountain looked completely different from during the day. Luo Zheng ran here and there for a while, trying hard to recall the place where he dealt with the demon. He searched 6 or 7 places in a row, but he still couldn't find the right one. Digging out a throwing knife buried deep in the ground of Blood Mountain was as difficult as looking for a needle in a haystack. After wandering back and forth for an hour, Luo Zheng was completely disoriented. It seemed that he had no other choice but to turn Blood Mountain upside down. Such a good treasure, but he lost it after using it once. It was indeed very depressing. Just as Luo Zheng was feeling dejected, the branches of the Blood Mountain forest not far away suddenly swayed. A woman in a green dress slowly walked out. The green-robed woman walked slowly. Under the bright moonlight, her beautiful face glowed with a faint glow. The green-robed long skirt perfectly trimmed her graceful figure. For a moment, Luo Zheng was actually a little mesmerized by her beauty. When Luo Zheng realized that this was Xiao Yufeng's mentor Su, he immediately withdrew his somewhat dazed gaze. With a smile on his face, he greeted, "Hello, Mentor Su. It's the middle of the night. Why did you come to Blood Mountain instead of resting in the dormitory?" Su Lingyun asked with a charming smile on her face. "Oh, I couldn't sleep. So I wanted to come out for a stroll." Luo Zheng's face was a bit hot. This lie seemed to be too shallow. "Is that so?" Su Lingyun took 2 steps forward. Her pair of charming eyes stared at Luo Zheng. She asked again, "Even if you were just taking a stroll, was there a need to come to Blood Mountain?" There was a hint of playfulness in her clear voice. Luo Zheng spread out his hands and smiled, "That's right. I don't think so." Su Lingyun shook her head and changed the topic, "I think you're looking for something, right?" Ahem. Unexpectedly, Su Lingyun guessed correctly. Luo Zheng touched his head and said, "This is a disciple's private matter." "Oh, since it's private matter, then I'll leave. I won't disturb your privacy. Goodbye." Su Lingyun waved a throwing knife in her hand and pretended to leave. Seeing the throwing knife, Luo Zheng's eyes suddenly lit up. He hurriedly said, "Hey, Mentor Su, this throwing knife." Su Lingyun turned around like a fairy and stared into Luo Zheng's eyes. She asked, "Yours?" Of course, she knew that this throwing knife belonged to Luo Zheng. During the day, she was the only one who witnessed the whole process of Luo Zheng killing the demons. She clearly recorded the location of the throwing knife, so she went up the mountain in the middle of the night to pick it up. Luo Zheng nodded and said, "Yes, this throwing knife is mine." "Well, although this throwing knife is broken, it still has such power. It's really a good treasure. I can return it to you, but..." Su Lingyun said, "But there's a condition." "What condition?" Luo Zheng asked. "Join our Xiao Yufeng." Su Lingyun's face showed a sly smile. At this time, Luo Zheng already had a premonition that Su Lingyun would say this sentence. Before, Luo Zheng still had some hesitation about which mountain to choose. But now, Luo Zheng already had a definite answer in his heart. Although Mentor Su seemed to be using this throwing knife to threaten him, this method was somewhat inappropriate. After all, this throwing knife was found by Mentor Su, wasn't it? If it weren't for her, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get this throwing knife back. Thinking of this, Luo Zheng nodded and said, "Tomorrow, I will choose Xiao Yufeng." Su Lingyun smiled sweetly at Luo Zheng, then pointed her slender finger at her ring and took out 2 small rings from it. "This throwing knife of yours is broken, and you haven't stepped into the Xiantian realm, so you can't use your Zhenqi to control it. It probably won't come back after you throw it out. As a gift for choosing Xiao Yufeng, I'll give this to you." Looking at the 2 small rings, Luo Zheng blinked. Obviously, he didn't understand the mystery of this gift. He didn't